Good morning, friends. We are here on a Thursday and we have a new, very fun mixed bag show for you. We've got 3 guests today, and the thing that we're going to be focusing on is basically stuff the media is ignoring or not properly or fairly covering. So we've got everything from stuff with the Epstein trials to talk to the way that Palestinian bias is still showing up in the mainstream media when Gaza and Palestine is getting any coverage whatsoever. And then we're also going to talk about the things media is ignoring from an epidemiologist's point of view when it comes to things like hantavirus and the measles outbreak, and even the regrifting of ivermectin. It is back, y'all. Those people who bought all that ivermectin during the COVID pandemic are now like, I've got a way to unload it. We're going to tell people it could solve hantavirus. Like, it can't. And she'll be here to talk to us all about the anti-vax grift later in the show. So stick around. Thanks for being here. Our first guest today is a friend of the show, someone who's been on many times before, my pal, Cameron. What's going on, dude?
Hey, V, not much, not much. Just getting that Palm Beach sand out of my clothes.
How was Palm Beach? Does it have a weird vibe? Like when you land in there, are you like, I'm in the machine?
Honestly, very much so. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. I mean, Florida's personally not my kind of place anyway.
Right.
I don't like places that where people have fewer rights than they should, and
For
Florida
real?
definitely fits that bill. But yeah, no, it was very strange. Um,
Did you
I
fly into
even
the Donald Trump airport or did you come into the regular one?
is is that what it's called now?
It's now called the Donald J.
Jeez.
Trump Airport, which is fitting that that's the airport that Jeffrey Epstein docked the Lolita Express at. I mean, it's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
creepy.
You couldn't have planned that. But no, I mean Palm Beach was interesting. The hearing was fascinating. I went over to the area where Mar-a-Lago is at for a little bit, and that was
Okay.
very bizarre.
Okay.
It was a whirlwind of a 30-hour trip.
Well, for folks who haven't met you before, let me give you a little introduction. Cameron's the founding editor and chief political correspondent for the Copper Courier, also serves as the national correspondent for Courier Newsroom out of Washington, D.C., and publishes a Substack called Below the Beltway, which focuses on politics. Most recently, Cam's been working on an expansive project called The Cover Up that analyzes the Epstein files, corruption connecting to Epstein. And this week, he was in Palm Beach, where women who say they were abused by the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and personal friend of Donald Trump provided their personal and sometimes emotional testimonies during an unofficial congressional hearing that was held by Democrats from the House Oversight Committee in Palm Beach, Florida. Now, when I said last night on the TikTok that you were coming on, people were like, "What trial?" I didn't even know there was a trial going on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that I got a lot of that too, actually. And it's because of a number of things.
Mhm.
One is that this hearing, due to security reasons, there it wasn't necessarily public. People were
Mhm.
invited to attend, the press was invited to attend, but it wasn't widely publicized because they were worried about security issues. And then
Mhm.
also because it was held by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, they
Mm.
are the minority party. And so they don't get the resources of the full committee to publicize things, to let the public know. And it wasn't an official hearing in the sense that they didn't have subpoena power. People were there of their own volition.
Mhm.
And the minority party can't really do much power wise without the consent of Republicans who
Mm.
wanted nothing to do with speaking with Epstein survivors.
I found out about it from you being down there and from Tara Palmieri, and uh, that was it. There was no NBC like breaking news
That
coverage live from there. I didn't see very many mainstream people at all, even searching for the results of the hearing. Today, it's like, okay, the Miami Herald obviously covered it, but I'm still not seeing any mainstream media cover it.
that yeah, no, that was really surprising to me too, actually. I guess maybe more disappointing than
Yeah.
surprising was that the media section where reporters and journalists and everyone who's invited to cover it, that section was maybe half full. So there were maybe a dozen reporters there. Most of them were local. They're from the Miami
Right.
Herald, the Palm Beach Post. There were a couple independent journalists like myself, Tara Palmieri, Jim Acosta was there.
Jim. Hmm.
And then there were a couple people. There was someone from NBC National that I recognized, but I don't know if he even ended up doing a story on it.
I haven't seen anything yet.
It's
Yeah,
unfortunately, it's just not something that a lot of the main outlets are interested in covering right now.
I know. That's what I'm hearing a lot is people are like, well, we have to move on because Iran war. We have to move on because China meeting. And I'm like, there's 24 hours in a day. Y'all got plenty of time to talk about something as I
Yeah.
think interesting as this. And what sort of pissed me off in myself, even, is this isn't even the first one of these. There was also a hearing in Albany, which I was unaware of in my very own state where victims were allowed to speak. You may probably knew about that one. You're deep in this.
I knew about it. I wasn't able to attend that one, but it is, yeah, no, it's very frustrating because yes, of course, we should report on the war in Iran. We should
Of
report
course. Yeah.
on, the US's dealings with China, but all of this, all the people that benefit from the corruption that we're seeing in these current events
Mhm.
stems from what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, who his clients were, who was benefiting financially. And most importantly, from what we learned at the Palm Beach hearing, is that because the government, both the state and federal government, went to such great lengths to protect him from actual consequences,
Mhm.
it has since empowered people to do illegal things if it makes
Mm.
them money, if it builds their own personal power and wealth, because they know that they're not going to be held accountable, that there
Right.
really are two different tiers of justice. And that's what
Mhm.
we saw from hearing from these witnesses and survivors, is that when Epstein was arrested in 2006 and convicted in 2008, he was actually still allowed to conduct business from home, which was sex trafficking, while
Right.
he was serving his sentence. And if someone's allowed to do that, then people are allowed
Yeah,
to do anything, apparently.
what hope do we even have? So from the Albany, just to catch you all up, and I did read this as part of the cover up on the Courier newsroom, a great asset for people who are wanting to keep up on all things Epstein. They have an entire section that is doing all kinds of deep reporting, not just on the headlines you're seeing in the mainstream media, but stuff you might not otherwise see at all. Things like what's going on with the plumbers of Epstein Gate and what happened with Howard Lutnick. And we're going to dive into all of that. But just to close the loop on Albany, they did establish this state Senate bill that would allow the victims of Jeffrey Epstein to sue the Epstein estate, which is still worth $120 million for damages. And they are doing a lot of work to really try and prosecute people if they can in Manhattan for the crimes that took place in New York. They are also passing this thing called the Trafficking Survivor Recovery and Accountability Act. That's a series of bills that have to do with being able to sue the Epstein estate, but also allowing victims to not have to testify in public. They can testify via closed circuit television, removing some of the statute of limitations, similar to the Adult Survivors Act of 2022, which when they allowed adults who had been victimized oftentimes by the Catholic Church to come forward and talk about it, even though the statute of limitations had expired. There was 3,000 lawsuits of people that came forward. This is where a lot of Me Too came from. Also, the second resurgence of people saying, I have a story to tell and I want to be honest about it. And so I think New York is doing some great stuff right now to try and get justice, delayed justice, civil justice, because there won't be criminal justice, unfortunately. But tell me a little bit about what you saw in the courtroom or in the hearing room in
Yeah.
Palm
So
Beach.
it was, I mean, being in the room and hearing witnesses and survivors and speaking with them, it's really heartbreaking,
Yeah.
because you read about the things that they experienced and the horrors they endured, and that's one thing. And honestly, reading about it or seeing it in the news, it almost feels more like television or like a
Yeah.
movie, where it's just these horrible things that we've been desensitized to because we see it in entertainment. But being there and seeing the pain on their faces and
Mm,
being in that silence as they pause because they can't talk about it anymore because it hurts
mm,
so much, it's heartbreaking. Like I had to take some time to like deep
take a break.
process it, honestly, because
Mm,
it's very heavy and it makes it
mm,
very real. And I know these hearings are long. This one I think was 3 or 4 hours. But I would encourage anyone to take some time to at least listen to the witness testimonies, because they are, they will just, I don't, they'll break your heart.
yeah. It really changes the way you see the story. As a lot of the media presents the story, and I always get aggravated that they always use pictures of Jeffrey Epstein, because I'm like, how many times do we have to put this man's face on the news in the front cover of a newspaper, you know? So they use pictures of him, and now there's this limited series that's going to be coming out starring Laura Dern as Julie K. Brown, which I think is very interesting. And That Woman Deserves Her Flowers finally got recognized by the Pulitzer after all these years. And not even with a Pulitzer, with like a special recognition for what she did, not even
Right. A
with the
little
official
side note
prize.
citation.
Come on.
It's a joke.
It is. And, I'm worried about the sort of almost iconization that they give Jeffrey Epstein. And I worry that the way that they'll do this limited series will end up the way that the ones like about Jeffrey Dahmer ended up, where people were like, well, he was hot. I'd let Jeffrey Dahmer stab me. And I'm like, this is getting very scary, the way that this is being covered.
I mean, there's definitely a fine line there where people need to know what happened, but we can't idolize and fetishize that lifestyle. You know, it's like people who watch The Sopranos and think Tony was the hero, and you know, they're like, oh, you know, he got all this money, he's getting all these girls, this guy's the man. When it's no, Epstein was laundering money, he was trafficking girls, he was enslaving people financially and beholding them to him, and just committing atrocities. Like, these men aren't heroes. They are disgusting stains on what should be an evolving society.
Totally. He, in some of the coverage that you guys have done, it goes beyond just the sex crimes into the broader cover up of the massive financial crimes that are going on. Can you, and for folks who are looking for this, you can go to epsteincoverup.us. And there is just massive amounts of information there that will help you better conceptualize how big this criminal enterprise was, even beyond the sex crimes. And they've made it really easy by making 20,000 documents searchable by people, by tags that are in there, by categories. A phenomenal just resource, and really deserves your support. But tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that maybe isn't hitting the mainstream.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing it. This whole investigation that we're doing, it's honestly thanks to our supporters and people who have been able to donate and contribute to Courier. You know, we've been able to launch this entire investigative unit. We hired people specifically to research the files and to research the people who are named in them. And we've been finding some really incredible stuff that isn't mentioned in other reporting, because they're stuck on salacious details or things that, you know, inadvertently idolize these men. Some of the biggest things that I'm looking into are the financial records, because as the survivors mentioned during the hearing the other day, that's how they're going to get justice. Proving sex crimes in a court of law is incredibly difficult. And we live in a patriarchal society that bends over backwards to not penalize men for sexual abuse. And so that's going to be hard for them to get justice through that avenue. But finances, you can prove, you know, it's on a ledger. It's in black and white. If Uncle Sam didn't get his money, he's going to come after him. And those are crimes that can be severe with penalties. And so I've been looking at these things called suspicious action reports. They're highly confidential documents that banks file on their employees to the US Treasury, or not on their employees, on their customers, like Epstein. They file them if they suspect that they're doing illegal activities, specifically money laundering, trafficking, illicit drug behavior, that sort of thing. When the Department of Justice first released this batch of Epstein files that we have, in addition to not redacting the names of victims, which has been a very traumatizing experience, I can get into, they talked about that as well, but they also forgot to, or accidentally left these suspicious activity reports fully unredacted when they published.
Oh, wow.
It's in these things, they're highly confidential. The Treasury holds them very close. Even congressional investigators, when they try and review these, have to go to the Treasury to look at them in person. They can't get copies of it. So the DOJ published all of these SARS reports, immediately took them offline, re-uploaded them as giant black rectangles, and published that. But we were able to scrape the original publication of the documents. So we have all the things that the DOJ took down and redacted. which is pretty insane.
That is pretty insane.
Yeah, well, in looking through, because I had spent, before we were able to get these, I had spent the past year and change trying to get my hands on these. And
Yeah.
Senator Ron Wyden, he's been doing a financial investigation in the Senate. He's been trying to get his hands on these documents for even longer, for 4 or 5 years. And so having these, I suddenly now have hundreds of these SARS reports outlining how Darren Indyke, one of his accountant or his personal lawyer, went to the banks and structured his deposits and withdrawals in a way to avoid being reported on. How Richard Kahn tried to wire millions of dollars offshore as soon as Epstein was arrested, in 2019. And this is while Epstein was trying to get bail.
Right.
The same time he was getting bail, they were like
moving
tens
all
of
this
millions
money
of dollars
out.
they were offshoring. Presumably so he could just flee. That didn't happen. But he got away with it once. Why not again?
Right.
So I'm finding a ton of things in these bank reports. And I'm taking them to Congress and asking them questions about why this wasn't investigated, why we're not seeing criminal charges against the banks, why we're not bringing banks in to testify, because that's where we're really going to get something. We're going to find his clients. There might not be a client list, but there is a list of people who received suspicious transactions and thousands of dollars from him and who sent him tons of money.
Wow. I don't know how I just flipped us on the screen, but me feverishly.
No, that was a nice dramatic effect.
It was me feverishly trying to write down the timestamp so that I can clip this later because our producer is out for their birthday. Happy birthday to Lana. But I was like, oh my God. And now I've like messed up our screen. But this is the joys of a live show. Cam, that is crazy. Does the DOJ know you have this stuff? Are you safe?
I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, we publish it, so if anyone reads it, they know what we're saying. And I think technically we're safe because they published it into the public sphere. But I mean, I have them saved on several hard drives, so they're not going anywhere.
Oh my gosh. I know. I was watching last night. There's so much weird reporting and lies that come out from the Trump administration, which is always just so frustrating to me. But I was trying to figure out last night, did the CIA actually raid Tulsi Gabbard's office or did they not? Like, we can't tell about this. There's like Newsmax was reporting the CIA, which isn't supposed to operate inside the United States.
Right.
But who cares? They do what they want anyway. They're probably watching us now. Raided Tulsi Gabbard's office looking for information related to the JFK assassination and something else dumb. And I was like, that's not what they were. If that's what they did, that's not what they were looking for. I mean, I don't know what they're doing.
Right.
That's it's so hard to tell what they know is going on and what they don't know is going on. Because I think we're lucky that they search their own names so much and they love their own fame so much that they're not looking at like independent media so much. They're just like, oh, was I on Fox News today? Let me clip that and put that on Troop Social. So
right. What can I show the president so that he'll think I'm cool?
Yes, maybe we're getting away with it for a little while longer. But I'm gonna add to the stage here. This is some of the reporting from the Epstein suicide note was the other thing that folks were so interested in. And you guys are reporting that it does seem real and went through some of his past things that he said, like this idea, what you want me to do, bust out crying. He says that in a couple of his emails to other people. Here it is here. But like this I thought was very suspicious. Why put out a suicide note not from the time he allegedly actually killed himself in the middle of like all of these other situations going on?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I have my own theories on the suicide note situation. Yeah, I know that one of our researchers, Katie Chenoweth, it was fascinating. She's so smart because as soon as this real note came out, whether it's real or not, I personally am not sure. But
subject line tits to his brother. What the fuck?
Declined to comment. But she read through it, was like, oh, he uses that language. He says this in letters over the course of years. And so it's interesting. I mean, I will say that there are countless suicide notes that are written where it's not followed through. Just because you write a note doesn't mean you're going to do it. Just because he wrote a note doesn't mean someone else didn't do it. But To me, so much of it just reads like a Trump tweet.
I
Uh,
thought so too.
I mean, part of me in my head is like, okay, did Trump just dictate this to someone and then they scribbled it in and put it in there?
Yeah.
I'm not
The
ruling it
first
out.
part is very much, but they all talk the same because they all came up in the same friends group in this Palm Beach weirdo little enclave of the world.
Yeah, they're
So I'm not surprised there's crossover in the language because they're all Roy Coning it. They're all Darvo. They're all like reverse the victim. They're all deny forever. So
yeah,
they were
that's true.
they went after me and they found nothing. It's a hoax. Like this is all the same language of these people.
Yeah, no, that's true. And in their like barely literate functioning way of
Yeah,
writing and describe, like that's the most depressing thing about reading through these emails is they write like children
they
and not in a
do.
good way. You know, like
No, well, they're
they're
all like private school flunkies.
right, right. Just these nepo babies and wealth beneficiaries and just benefactors of white privilege, and they think they can get away with everything. And I mean, to their credit, so far they have.
Right. I mean, my goodness. There's also if it's not coming back to Palm Beach, it comes back to Peter Thiel, right? These are the two
Yeah,
things that these people love. And of course, you guys have a piece on Peter Thiel also from Nina and Katie over at Courier, who do a really funny thing called American Freak Show is their newsletter, and it's all about like all the freak ass shit that Trump is doing. So like strongly suggest checking that out as well. But they were talking
it's a great
about the
read.
Epstein class loving supervillain Peter Thiel, who also loves secrets. Can you talk a little bit about the Epstein Thiel crossover?
Yeah, so Teal is such a fascinating character in the worst way
Yeah.
because he, by all accounts, he wasn't involved in the sexual crimes nature,
No.
as far as we can tell. He's more interested in controlling the world and creating a techno theocratic state where he is the king of a serfdom, essentially.
Right.
And I know that sounds crazy, but that's how he describes it. And him and Epstein, they forged bonds over some finances. He invested some of Epstein's money that his estate's still making investment money off of. But they were pretty into the idea of controlling the populace and finding ways to control narratives and develop things like crypto as a way to be free, essentially, of taxes and the government, and to create kingdoms unto themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just fascinating because now we're seeing cryptocurrencies be revealed, unfortunately, as mostly scams, as
And
ways
rug
for rich people to
pulls.
get more
Mm-hmm.
money. But
Mm-hmm.
in the early days, it was this decentralized monetary platform, and there was
Mm-hmm.
potential for it. And it's just such a bummer that these rich assholes latched onto it and have corrupted it to such an extent.
Seriously. And here he is telling Peter Thiel, apparently, I'd be happy to share the expenses for the Gawker lawsuit. The Gawker lawsuit refers to Hulk Hogan and Bubba the Love Sponge out of Tampa. Again, weird Florida stuff and like some sex tape made with his wife. And Gawker published it. And then Hulk wanted to sue them. And then Peter Thiel funded the lawsuit that shut down Gawker, who had outed Peter Thiel
Yeah,
before. So
yeah.
that was his like sort of round robin way of getting some justice. I guess there wasn't a Miami hotel window to push Gawker out of. Allegedly. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
That boy killed himself. Definitely, totally. Nothing suspicious there. Peter Thiel, the never-ending enigma that is Peter Thiel. Why
Yeah.
can't these people with all this money just fuck off to somewhere and have a nice life?
Right,
You know,
well,
like,
part
come
of me wants
on.
to say that, but the idea is like, oh, why don't they just go fuck off to some island and
Go
live their
li-
happy life? But then Epstein did that,
that was the problem.
and
Yeah.
yeah, the problem is they can't leave well enough alone. That's
I know. Just go to Monaco and have
why
a
you got to
nice
tax them so
life.
they don't have enough money to do
Yes.
this terrible stuff.
There is something that happens to their
Let's use
brains
that
when
money
they
for
hit
some
a
good.
billion. Yeah, like do something else with it. They're just
Anything else.
yeah, anything else at all, but certainly tax them. So what kind of stuff are you working on this week?
So the story I'm working on right now is partially a follow up to the Palm Beach hearing. It's something interesting that a narrative that was revealed more or less throughout this
Mhm.
hearing but I don't think it's really been grasped on that much.
Okay.
But really what the Democrats on the Oversight Committee want is to hold accountable 30 years of failed prosecutions and failed
Oh, yeah.
prosecutorial work. Because,
Yes.
Epstein, he was first arrested in 2006. He was friendly and worked with prosecuting. He went on ski trips with attorneys and did all this stuff to avoid consequences, which allowed him, again, to continue sex trafficking and abusing women while he was serving his prison sentence. He would work from home. Girls would come over. He would do terrible things, and then he'd go spend a night in a resort, essentially. Then, continue on. He grows this empire for the next decade. Florida turns a blind eye. He gets arrested in 2019, finally, after overplaying his hand, mysteriously dies in prison. And then the government under Trump and then Biden and then Trump again have done nothing. They billions of dollars, over 1,000 victims, countless people named as accomplices and co-conspirators. And there's 2 arrests, 1 conviction, and a conviction that, they're now contemplating pardoning with Ghislaine Maxwell. That's what really stuck out to me, is that, the Democrats on the Oversight Committee, honestly, personally, I feel like initially they got into this for political gain, that they saw blood in the water. Trump was nervous. They wanted to jump on it. But after actually hearing these survivors and looking at the evidence, they're pissed and they want something to change. Something that Robert Garcia, and I think you had him on the show yesterday.
I had Garcia yesterday, and he told me he's coming after this guy.
Yes.
Raise your hand if you're responsible for Jeffrey Epstein's fucking crimes not being properly investigated and Donald Trump not being properly held accountable.
Yeah.
Merrick Garland.
Merrick Garland, and that's what I'm writing is that there's now 2 former U.S. attorneys general who are in the crosshairs of the investigation. There's Pam Bondi and Merrick Garland, because she was essentially finishing his work of doing nothing to hold them accountable.
Right.
And I think that's really important, because it does show a shift in the mentality of the committee and in where they want things to go, that they're not just looking to score political points. They actually want to figure out what was going on at the Department of Justice and why people didn't act and do anything. If there's all this evidence, if justice is blind and nonpartisan, then why is it nonpartisan in the sense that people get off for doing terrible things? Why are both sides of the aisle allowing this to happen? And so I think going after Garland, going after Bondi is a sign that even, if Dems retake the House in the fall and are the majority members of this committee, that they're not just going to use it to score political points, that they actually want results. And that's what I'm writing about right now.
Going after Merrick Garland, I think, is one of the most important things to include. Of course, Pam Bondi as well, but given the fact that Merrick Garland inherited the opportunity to provide the accountability that the American public wanted after Trump won and after all the Epstein stuff came out, and they just sat on it. And Joe Biden is a nice man, but his commitment to being a gentleman and sort of trying to move ahead and just move on from things really fucked us. Like, there's just, that is part of his legacy. And it's really unfortunate that that's the path that he chose, but it is. So I'm glad to see any day Merrick Garland is sad is a happy day for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'll throw a little curveball your way.
Yeah.
I also think that they should subpoena former U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, because she did the same thing that Secretary Scott Bessent is doing right now. Ron Wyden tried since 2021 to get access to these SARS reports that, again, the DOJ accidentally published because they're incompetent. He was trying to get those for years from the Trump administration or the Biden administration, and Yellen wouldn't budge. She wouldn't let him access them, wouldn't give him, the ability to see them. It wasn't until, I believe, 2024, for one day, it was Valentine's Day 2024, the Treasury let members of the Senate Congressional Finance Investigation Committee go into the Treasury, not with they couldn't take anything with them. They could only do handwritten notes, but they gave them one day to look through thousands of documents.
Awful.
And
Yeah.
even in those, that's where Wyden found the $1 billion worth of suspicious transactions that were going to sanctioned Russian banks in Eastern European countries where Epstein trafficked women. And even though he found all that, Yellen didn't let him back in. And so for as bad a job as Bessent is doing in stonewalling this investigation, Yellen was just as guilty.
Yeah. There has to be accountability. There just has to
Yeah.
be. And one thing I like about Robert Garcia is he's like, look, I'm a millennial. I wasn't around for any of this shit. I owe nobody nothing. These aren't my donors and friends. I think it's a sickness. I grew up under this sickness where our whole childhood was very sexualized. And now we're in a place where I'm starting to learn that the people who claim to be the adults in the room weren't actually out for the best interest of the public or young people or vulnerable people. And he's pissed. So I appreciate what he's been doing over there, you know, how it's working out. And so, yeah.
No, you can tell there's a fire lit in him about this specifically. And I think that's really encouraging. And the other members of the committee seem similar. Yasmin Ansari, she's told me a few times, she's like, I was a kid when this was going on. She was in high school. And she knew that Epstein was a pedophilia creep. So she's like, it just blows my mind that these people who worked with him every day act like they had no idea that this whole thing was going on when, you know, a kid in Scottsdale, Arizona knew all these details. Like it's beyond insulting to think that they can get away with lying about this.
There was an interesting thing I heard recently. We had Ryder Strong on, and he was talking.
About,
he is so great, and he was talking about, you know, remembering his childhood in certain ways and different things that happened to him as a child actor. And he was saying, you know, he had told himself for a long time, well, it was different in the 90s. It was just different in the 90s. And one of his friends said, it wasn't different. You were a child. Now you're an adult and you don't act like that. The people who were acting like that were adults. So for you, your understanding of the world was being shaped by adults who were doing abusive and sick and weird things to a lot of your friends. But you don't do that as an adult because you know better. Those people already were adults and should have already known better and chose anyway. So I was like, wow, that really changed my idea about a lot of things too. This idea of like, well, when I was in the 90s, I said dumb stuff. Yeah, I was 15.
Right.
And now that I'm 40, I don't say dumb things. The people who were 40 doing weird stuff to me at 15 were 40. They should have known better. Right. And I was like, wow, that really changes that narrative. It takes it right away. So thanks to Ryder Strong for that one. And thanks for being here with us today, Cam. Folks can find more of Cam's reporting at Below the Beltway. And also I put the link on our Instagram here. You can click on it, the Epstein Cover-Up. It's epsteincoverup.us. It's a really great resource. Dig in there. And I know for a lot of folks, they're like, it's difficult for me to engage with the Epstein stuff because of my own personal traumas. Go in and look at the financial crimes. Go in and look at stuff that's not the sex crimes. There is a lot of work to be done, and we can all do our piece, whatever makes sense to us, to ensure that we get accountability. So I appreciate you, Cam. We'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, V. Always good to talk.
You too. Bye, friend. So I love Cam. Cam's such a great dude. And we have another great guest coming up next. We've got Adam Johnson from The Intercept. Adam is the co-host of the Citations Needed podcast and the author of How to Sell a Genocide, the Media's Complicity in the Destruction of Gaza. It comes out April 21st, and it's available for pre-order now through Pluto Press at plutobooks.com. And he's going to be talking to us a little bit about some reporting he did, digging into the way that the media covered the genocide in Gaza. Now, maybe this is something that also, like, people are like, can we move on from Epstein? Can we move on from what happened in Palestine? No, we can't, because we're still just uncovering and learning about the atrocities and the unfairness of the way that these stories are being covered. So I'm happy to welcome Adam to our group. Hello, Adam. How are you?
Hi, how do I sound? I'm in a rather unremarkable hotel in Milwaukee right now.
So you sound great. Yeah, it's working. It's sounding good.
All right, thank you. So I appreciate that, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this book, How to Sell a Genocide, the Media's Complicity in the Destruction of Gaza. What made you most interested in this story initially?
Well, I had been covering it since the beginning of the genocide in October of 2023, and the media's role in promoting lies, double standards, racist tropes, etc., to create the conditions of support in the U.S. for genocide in Gaza was essential, because obviously Israel's military cannot function for more than a week or two without U.S. support, and so U.S. support is essential for that, for the destruction of Gaza that has since killed anywhere between 75 to 120, 130,000 people. And so there needed to be an account of the first year, a document from October 2023 to October of 2024, how the media helped sell a genocide in the most literal sense. The title is not meant to be provocative. It's meant to actually discuss ways in which the genocide, such as it was, a decision that was made very early on, almost certainly on October 7th, to commit genocide in Gaza, which is to say a combination of ethnic cleansing and the mass destruction, mass death, with hopes of driving Palestinians out of Gaza, who are, of course, an inconvenient people to many in our government and the governments in the government in Israel. And so this is a documentation of how the media assisted that. It focuses on double standards in language, double standards in emotive terms, double standards in who gets to be human, focuses on their role laundering Israeli lies, whether it's a Hamas command and control center under a hospital in Al Shifa that did not exist, or whether it was UNRWA, which is the aid organization that kept people alive in Gaza, was supposedly linked to quote so-called Hamas terrorists, a story that also ended up being completely fake. So unlike Iraq, which had obviously one major WMD scandal, the way the genocide was sold was what I argue is dozens of kind of mini WMDs, mini lies throughout the weeks and months in which the facts on the ground were cemented such that genocide became inevitable by about mid 2024. And so that book covers the first year, focuses primarily on the first 3 to 6 months and the media's role in promoting lies, but also in some cases, namely the New York Times, going into direct genocide incitement by promoting lies about aid workers, educators, healthcare workers, and others who were maintaining life and sustaining life in Gaza.
I remember a couple days from the early days of the coverage. I was at the Washington Post at the time, and they were doing some decent photojournalism in the beginning, trying to document what had gone on. And it seemed like a lot of the focus was the fact that we can't get specifically into Gaza, so all we can show you are the Israeli destruction sites. And they were bringing people in and touring all of these horrific sites that they were like, this is what happened at the fairgrounds. This is what happened at this house. This is what happened here. And it did seem like to the average person, they were like, oh, well, reporters just can't get into Gaza, so they're just trying to show us what they can get into. And I was like, I don't know that that's exactly true either.
Well, there was, of course, dozens of journalists in Gaza.
Right.
They were just killed by Israel, and many of them, but because they were Palestinian, they were considered per se untrustworthy, or so-called linked to Hamas. So, there wasn't Western journalists, but of course there were Palestinian journalists. Over 200, well, depending on the number, 200 or 250 have been killed since the beginning of the genocide. And so, for example, we go over the asymmetry of emotive terms, which is to say, the reporting on October 7th framed the killing of the Palestinian killing of Israelis was always framed in emotive terms. So the New York Times used the word massacre in the first 100 days, 124 times to describe the killing of Israelis. Slaughter 53 times, but in the first 100 days, and really ever, they never used the word massacre or slaughter to describe the killing of Palestinians. Washington Post did this as well, 50 to 0, 25 to 0. Associated Press, 80 to 0, 18 to 0. And the reason why those asymmetries are important is because they reveal who's considered human and who's not. And so Palestinian deaths were routinely framed in the most anodyne and medical way possible, always said to be pursuing some ostensibly military aim of eliminating Hamas. So meanwhile, you had death counts coming out every day of 300, 400, 500 a day. There was one day in late October that was 1,000 in one day, and it was always framed as this as collateral damage in some so-called war on Hamas, a war that we know was by definition impossible. Something confirmed by Tony Blinken, both behind closed doors in January of 2024, when he told Netanyahu that militarily defeating Hamas was impossible. But of course, it was the perfect pretext to kill an arbitrarily high number of Palestinians. And somehow Israel manages to kill 20,000 children in 2 years. That is a minimum estimate. The number is almost certainly double that, but for the sake of argument, we'll say 20,000 children in 2 years, and somehow manages to do that without once committing a massacre or a slaughter. Definitionally, according to the New York Times and the Washington Post and other major outlets. And what I argue is that doesn't strike me as mathematically possible. And that indeed, editorially, it was impossible for Israel to commit a massacre or a slaughter by definition, because only Palestinians, Arabs, or these kind of vague Asiatic hordes are capable of killing for the sake of killing, whereas Israel somehow manages to kill six figures reluctantly and with a heavy heart and pursuant some ostensible military aim. I make the argument that that is obviously not true, and that was simply a racist and chauvinist editorial decision that had no basis in objective reality, especially when you consider the openly genocidal statements being made by Israeli officials at the time. You had Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, talking about how they're human animals, how we're going to cut off food. We have, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu's infamous Amlach speech on the invasion, on the eve of the invasion of Gaza. That is a clear genocidal reference. We have Isaac Herzog, the president of Israel, who talked about how there's no innocent people in Gaza. And this is all documented by the International Criminal Court of Justice in their plausible genocide finding in January of 2024. And so you had all these genocidal statements coming out of Israel, but what I call center left or liberal, it's an imperfect term, media, corporate media, whatever kind of term one wishes to label this so-called mainstream media, was routinely framing it as a bumbling military enterprise with ostensible military aims. And what I argue is that's clearly not true. And we now know, based on consensus of genocide scholars, including Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders, the Munchen Institute on the Prevention of Genocide, that it is now consensus it was a genocide. And this was obvious at the time, but our media was wedded to this racist idea, this reductionist and war on terror framework of a so-called war on Hamas, which at the time everyone knew was fictitious and pretextual.
And there was this, you also studied some of the language that they used over and over and over. And I found this one really stood out to me, this idea, Israel's right to defend itself. You found that it had been used so many times, but there was no Palestinian right to defend itself. It never said that. And in fact, I mean, there's just constant clips that you have here of every single person, from politicians and media talking head, both sides of the aisle, saying this term, Israel's right to defend itself. How did that stand out to you?
Well, it's this ostensibly kind of banal observation that a country has a right to defend itself. Right. And of course, it's the context in which it's used is invariably hand waving away mass civilian deaths. So people will sort of just throat clearing this thing. We say, clearly Israel's a right to defend itself, which is to say they support the fundamental premise of so-called eliminating Hamas. Again, you cannot eliminate an indigenous guerrilla army. Again, regardless of what one thinks about Hamas, it maintains roughly 50% support within Gaza. It, of course, is made up of Palestinians who themselves were either orphans or the grandparents or refugees of Israeli violence. So this idea that you could somehow eliminate them while killing 20,000 children and everyone in Palestine, rather than creating Hamas 2.0 and Hamas 3.0, you're going to somehow create a bunch of compliant NGO employees and yeoman fishermen, was obviously absurd on its face. But this idea of Israel having a right to defend itself was this mantra you threw out, invariably either to justify mass civilian death or to preemptively justify the mass civilian death that was about to take place. Because everybody knew, and everyone currently knows, that the issue is fundamentally political, requiring a political solution, and that Israel's right to defend itself was a permission structure for mass violence, in effect, if not intent. And of course, there is no corollary or parallel Palestinian right to defend themselves. Palestinians are meant to be, they can fit into three categories. They're either mindless cartoon terrorists who kill simply for sadistic and jihadist glee with no secular or political grievances, or they can be passive victims who are, kind of sitting there and doing the crying routine and then they could sort of feel bad for them, but there's no causal agent or political context to the death. Or three, they could be native informants. They can be hired by the Atlantic to sort of spout whatever kind of liberal Zionist claptrap that gives them permission to belong and be a part of Western media.
This was another big thing that I remember seeing just over and over and over and over, is we have to bomb them. We have to kill all these people because they're using civilians as human shields. So we have to kill the civilians also. And you found that this was used quite a bit as well.
Yeah, so what's important to understand is that the word human shields has a very specific definition in international humanitarian law. It means at gunpoint or through coercion, forcing a civilian to protect you from enemy fire or to go clear out a building of booby traps and bombs. That's what the definition of human shields means. Right. Now, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, major human rights organizations have never endorsed this ad hoc media definition of a military actor in proximity to civilians. That is a definition used, as I note, hundreds of times in Western media, but is not one endorsed by any human rights groups. And indeed, we saw an example of this when the United States did exactly what Jake Tapper and others had accused Hamas of doing, of so-called living among civilians or hiding among civilians when they began bombing Iran in February of 2026 of this year. They cleared out their military bases because of Iranian counterattacks, and they posted them up in civilian hotels and civilian office parks throughout Kuwait, UAE, and Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries. This is literally the definition that was used by Jake Tapper and by the New York Times and by David Leonhardt to sort of smear Palestinians as inviting their own destruction. But of course, it was never used against the United States. And of course, the United States is not indigenous to Kuwait and the UAE and Qatar, whereas Palestinians are, of course, indigenous to Palestine. And so this human shields narrative, which was what I call one of the moats of rationalization. So everyone sees the United States, specifically a Democratic president, supporting a genocide, and that can't be reconciled with their liberal worldview. And so you begin to sort of rationalize and reverse engineer excuses for why this is happening. And the most popular, and I think most influential one, was this idea of, yes, it's bad. Yes, hundreds of people are dying a day. Yes, children are being carried away by their parents in garbage bags after they've been liquidated and shredded by Israeli bombs. But it's actually part of Hamas's strategy of using Palestinians as a human shield. So it's what I call a kind of liberal SSRI. It sort of soothes you into sort of accepting the carnage as not something that you are responsible for, or your president or your country is responsible for, but is indeed a cynical tactic by Hamas because they live in proximity to civilians. And of course, Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on earth. So by definition, a military actor is going to be close to civilians, just as the Mossad headquarters is underneath civilian infrastructure in Tel Aviv. Just as the Israeli army routinely travels and lives among civilians. Anyone who's been to Israel can tell you that if you take the train, it's full of IDF soldiers. Every civilian infrastructure in Israel is populated with Israeli soldiers, because Israel as well is a very small, densely populated place. And so the whole premise was absurd. It was a way of hand-waving away the carnage that was emitting from Gaza, and to say, oh, well, this is part of some sinister terrorist plot. Rather than something that we as Americans are responsible for. And so it became a sort of cognitive dissonance amelioration line that was very popular in Western media. And it was a mantra in a sense, used over and over again: human shields, human shields, human shields. Aside from the fact that, again, no human rights group had ever endorsed that, it still has never endorsed that definition. It is a pure media concoction.
It's really important reporting that you're doing, and I'm so grateful to have access to this. You can read all of this reporting that we were showing on the screen share right now at theintercept.com. You can read it for free. There's not a paywall, so I suggest you do dig into it, because it's important that you learn how to recognize when this happens again, and it will continue to happen, especially with the war in Iran. We're seeing a lot of the same tropes coming up. Originally, it was, oh, the people of Tehran deserve to be free, and we're going to liberate them. And now it's, no, they're all terrorists, and they're all casualties, and they all hate death to America and all this other bullshit. And it's like, it's just, if we know better, then we won't be fooled as easily. And I appreciate so much your reporting, Adam. What kind of stuff, where else can people find you, and what are you working on this week?
Well, there's the book, How to Sell a Genocide. Obviously, you mentioned the podcast I have, and that's it. I have a podcast. I freelance for The Intercept and for others, and I have a book out now. I think you said it was for pre-order, but that was because...
Oh, yeah, that was... of course, it's past April.
That was old copy. Yeah, it's out. It's actually out now for order.
I did read that out loud. It'll be out April 21st. It's like May 14th.
I think everyone knew what was being... It was old. It's actually our fault. I think that's an old bio, so I knew that.
That's okay. So, yeah, and the book, once again, is called How to Sell a Genocide: The Media's Complicity in the Destruction of Gaza. Focuses on the first year. And I think it's just really important for folks to learn about, and so that you can have that media literacy for as the United States continues to do what it does. So thank you so much, Adam, for being with us. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye, friend. One of the things that really bothered me about covering the events of October 7th and the following war and genocide in Gaza was, I was at the Washington Post, and one of our colleagues had been killed by an IDF soldier. And it was something that happened before October 7th. And I'm going to put her photo up here. Shireen was in her press vest. in a press area when she was shot intentionally by an IDF soldier in the head. It was a headshot, so it wasn't like some stray bullet or friendly fire or whatever. And there has still, all these years later, been no arrests, no punishment, and they know exactly who the soldier was, and they have done nothing to justify, to satisfy her family and the public's desire for there to be accountability for this killing, this intentional murder of a journalist reporting pre-October 7th even. So it doesn't even have anything to do with that. And she was a Palestinian American working for the Washington Post, and our government and the IDF and the Israeli government has done nothing to justify their actions and to provide accountability to her family. And I think it's truly just disgusting and egregious, and something that I'll continue to talk about. Also, IDF couldn't even leave her family alone on the day of her funeral. If you see this casket floating out here, on the day of Shireen's funeral, the IDF raided the funeral and tried to shut down her celebration of life, and grieving people, intimidating them horribly. So just something that is incredibly hurtful to this day, to me, to her family, to journalists everywhere, and to our next guest as well, who is a longtime friend of the show, someone that I accidentally send TikToks to in the middle of the night when I'm falling asleep with my phone in my hand for whatever reason. I send them to Rua Roman, representative of the state of Georgia. She is a state representative in Georgia right now, running for state senate, also Palestinian American woman. Rua, thank you for being with us. We're talking about some tough stuff today, but you're always, a light of optimism for the resilience of the Palestinian people, and the fact that you're not defined just by what the American government and the Israeli government have done to your people in Gaza, but by the role that you play as a contributing and joyful member of society here, helping so many people. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's so lovely to reconnect.
You might have to move your mic just a little bit more.
There
we go. Yeah, you got to TikTok mic it.
Oh, Lord.
So you are out in the world right now. Rua is currently running for office. We met for the very first time at the DNC when they wouldn't let you give your beautiful speech, which was insane, because at this point, we were telling them Kamala's going to lose because of the Biden policy in the Middle East, and Kamala wasn't down with the policy, but wasn't allowed to break ties, break the wall with Biden. And here you were giving this beautiful speech to the uncommitted delegates outside of the DNC. You also got to come up and go live with me, but I think this was one of the things that really I point to. If the DNC won't release the autopsy of why Kamala lost, I think this was one of the main points. So talk to me a little bit about this day and what you've been up to since.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me. And to sort of remind everybody, Uncommitted had been a sort of primary focus by Democrats for Democrats' effort to break through the noise and show that the polls that we had about Biden were not accurate, that he himself was not getting an accurate story. And this was actually something that Vice President Harris herself said in her own book. And part of that work was it galvanized so many people. They won actual seated delegates at the DNC. They weren't crashing. They weren't sort of there unwelcome. They actually earned that seat at the table. And part of their asks mainly were policy. I think people forget that the main part of this was real policy asks around an arms embargo and changing policy as it pertains to Palestinians. But a symbolic gesture was any Palestinian speaker. I happened to be the one that everyone coalesced around, but for months they had been giving sort of lists of names of people, and the DNC refused to have even a single one of any of us go up there. And, I remember thinking at the time, and I think people think, oh, we were upset we never got the speaker. No, we were upset because it was such a clear moment of the disconnect between the DNC and voters all around the country.
Totally. And it was a beautiful speech, and we will publish it later so folks can read it because it was incredible. But you can just look up Rua Roman, 2 M's, DNC speech, and it was quite inspiring and lovely. But you have been representing the state of Georgia well. You're moving on to the Senate now. What made you want to jump from the Congress to the state Senate? What's that been like?
Yeah, so for us, just like there's Congress on a federal level, there's Congress on a state level, and so there's state house, there's state senate. My state senator resigned, and under this specific state senate are 2 of the most flippable state house seats, obviously including my own, and mine is now a safe seat. And so the thinking was, look, we have been building this organizing arm, this organizing apparatus. What better place to put it than on top of these state house seats that we can and should be flipping? And on top of that, to me, I firmly believe that we're in a moment right now where the only way to save our democracy is to take back as much power as humanly possible and implement the protections necessary to protect all of us and all of our rights.
Totally. And you got a pretty big endorsement recently, AOC coming down to the district.
Yeah, this was wild. This was honestly never on my bingo card list of any possibilities, to be very, very frank with you. But it was awesome because ever since the DNC, and this, we got in touch with a lot of people, AOC's team included, and I don't think I didn't realize that I never shared this publicly, but her and her team had reached out during the DNC asking how they can help. We're pushing really
Oh,
hard for a
good.
Palestinian speaker. And at the time, as state legislators, we don't get staff really unless you're in the
Right.
middle of campaign season, you have a campaign manager. And her team reached out. They were like, "Are you okay? How can we help?" Incredibly, incredibly helpful behind the scenes. And so we had kept in touch, and ever since then I've been asking people, please come to Georgia, please come see
Yeah.
what's happening here, the opportunity here, the potential of our state, the sort of growing progressive movement that with the right kind of investment could really change not just our state but the country as a whole. And they were the first true like national leaders to come down here and do that, and it wasn't fanfare, doing a rally, press everywhere. It was actually quiet conversations with local organizers, particularly around data centers. And that's how we had reconnected, because I introduced the first statewide data center moratorium in the country. Her
Mhm.
and Senator Sanders had introduced the first nationwide data center moratorium in the country. And so that was part of like all of these sort of things kind of came together, and we had an opportunity to chat, and they made clear an endorsement was on the table, and we absolutely took it.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. She's the coolest.
Yeah, it was
Just
really
doing the
sweet.
most. And just so thoughtful and kind and present. The time that I got to meet her in her office, I was really impressed by how present she is with you when she's with you. Like,
Yeah,
just really,
doesn't
really
feel
cool.
distracted. And
No.
look, I want to be clear. It's not as if I've minced my words with her team.
Yeah.
I always, everyone who knows me knows I will give you feedback, and I will also always have your back. And
Yep.
I just really appreciate that they do try to engage as deeply and as authentically as possible. And again, to me, there's a lot of opportunity here, and we should be thinking about the South and what it can show, but also, we can really raise the bar here.
I agree. And Amanda of Amanda Smile Takes, who's on our Wednesday show yesterday, was saying the South is the move. The reason why we got into the situation we are now is because 50 years, the Republicans started the Southern strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we need to have a Southern strategy. And it's not this idea that, well, those are red states. No, those are heavily disenfranchised, gerrymandered states. And they're trying to do something like that in Georgia now. They're trying to do a little redistricting on you guys, too. Can you talk about what's happening there?
Yeah, so for us right now, actually, part of the reason I'm sitting in my car is I just joined the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. We have the largest Black caucus in the country. People don't realize this, but it's literally 2/3 of the Democratic caucus here. And unfortunately, the governor, after saying that he's not going to do redistricting until at least the end of the year, has now decided that we are going to have a special session in the middle of the World Cup in order to redraw the maps. And I want to pause here for a second, because the reason we even had to do a special session this summer is because 2 years ago they said that we needed to take away QR codes on our ballots. When you get your ballot printed, there's a QR code, it scans it, tallies who you voted for, and kind of goes from there. 2 years ago, they said that starting July 1st, 2026, those QR codes are banned, meaning that after July 1st, our ballots are illegal. Like, we don't, so
Oh,
if we were to cast
please.
ballots in the general election during the midterm, the validity of those ballots comes into question. And so they were like, we need to come back over the summer to fix it, even though we could have done it a month ago, but because
Sure.
of their own politics, they didn't. So now we have to come back in the summer to fix the QR code. And they said, well, we're already here. Let's just gerrymander some more. And, I was standing with the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus to make clear that this is nothing more than an attack on, frankly, all of us, but particularly Black legislators, because
Yeah.
what people don't realize, and we've been saying this for years and no one believes me, and part of the reason we did this like crazy run for governor for a while was because there is so much potential here, and we can truly not only flip the governor's mansion, but at least the state house.
Totally, totally. And I'm such a supporter of yours and so happy that you're out there doing that work. Maybe we'll get you at the federal level someday. I know your focus is Georgia and you love the people of Georgia and you'll be sticking with them for quite some time, but you've got a long career ahead of you. Maybe we'll get you at the federal level someday.
Thanks.
But Rua is a state representative now running for Senate in Georgia. If you're in Georgia, kick her a couple bucks if you can. You've been great at fundraising and you're a very responsible person. Also, volunteer if you can. You don't even have to be in the state of Georgia to do stuff like help with phone banking and just helping to spread her message. Just a little bit of her website. She's got a long history of being a representative and keeping promises in Georgia, and just a fantastic person and a delight to chat with. So check her out at ruaforgeorgia.com, also a social media superstar. So we see you on social media all the time.
Thank
And
you.
I'll see you in your DMs in the night when I accidentally
wait.
send you TikToks.
It's honestly such a pleasant surprise every time, and we all adore you. My staff adores you, and so like, thank you
thanks.
for just always shedding a light on the places a lot of people keep forgetting.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you, Rua. We'll see you later. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Bye. Rua, fantastic person, great gal, doing wonderful things for the state of Georgia. Check it out. Like I said, it's ruaforgeorgia.com. Yes.com. And so you can check her out. And this is why we do the show, right? We want to bring you stuff that's scary and intimidating, but then we want to show you that there are helpers and people who are defiant optimists out there that are making things make sense. And that this sort of trend of anti-intellectualism and hate and bigotry has only gone as far as like the pendulum can go. It always swings back the other way. And throughout history, that's just been the way it has gone. After World War II, there was a period of great economic boost because the government was investing in helping people returning from war get houses. And then we had the civil rights movement after that. And so it's not to say that we're in the worst time in history. We're not. We're in a weird time. We're in a kind of ugly time. We're in a time that I'm not going to look fondly back on, but I'm going to look back and go, wow, we really survived that. And these are the people who were with me when we did it. And that's why I'm so appreciative of folks like Rua and folks like Adam and Cameron who are doing this awesome reporting. And also our science community, because yes, we will be moving now from things that are happening in the global world and politics to the other things that's been heavily politicized, science, which from what I recall was why I was bad at it in school, is because there was a right and a wrong answer. You couldn't like hustle your way through it the way you could with like advanced drama or any of the or history. I could be like, well, on the other hand, no, science had a right and wrong answer. But Jessica, now science has a right, wrong, and a grifty answer.
Yeah,
right? This is where we're at.
That's
Welcome,
where we're at.
friend. We have a lot of epidemiologist friends here on Under the Desk News because I'm a very nervous person. So we had Dr. Kat, epidemiologist at the beginning of the week. Now we've got Jessica, MS here, epidemiologist, worked on the COVID project, which was incredible, tracking things that went on with COVID. Was recognized by the Peabody Awards. Very, very cool stuff. And what are we working on now? Is it hantavirus? Is everybody hitting you up for info about that?
All day, every day.
What is happening with that? Because there's a case in New York now, and I'm like, great.
Yeah. So I just want to level set with folks and say it's an emerging outbreak. We expect to see more cases. We saw that new case that happened in Illinois, completely unrelated. I think that's part of the, availability bias that makes people just a little bit more afraid. That was just a standard old rodent
regular old
hanta.
Somebody was sweeping out a cabin and got a little hanta. Okay.
Sweeping up the poop.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to be unusual for us to see more suspected cases, possibly more confirmed cases, but I just want to really level set and say we're not dealing with an explosive outbreak here.
Okay.
And there, thankfully, all the Americans who did test positive have now tested negative. And I think we're not out of the woods completely because some people are still in their incubation periods where a person who was negative could potentially test negative or positive later. Fully want to recognize that. I think a lot of people have questions about, okay, but when are they actually in the clear? Yeah, there's some time that we still need to pass through. But I am still not panicked. And I feel like I'm telling folks, like, I'll tell you if you need to, and it's not now.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And that's what we need from our science communicator people is like, listen, I'm at a 1 out of 10. I'll let you know when we get higher. Laughter and Light Melody has been doing this too. She was at a 4 at one point, like a couple of weeks ago. She's like, I'm at a 4. And then it went right back down to 2, like an hour later. So I was like, okay, keep it real with me, but there are some things. Hantavirus is like the trending thing of right now. And there's like a guy in quarantine in Nebraska who I'm finding really interesting to follow on TikTok. I'll pull up his thing while you go over the next chart, but his name is Josh and he's an American who was on there and he's in the quarantine facility in Nebraska and he's like receiving packages and he's got his little Peloton bike in there and his little Squishmallows and he's riding it out. He's making the best of it. So as long as Josh is safe, I feel safe. I'm like, okay, good. good because he's there voluntarily. He doesn't have to stay there. And I think everyone really appreciates the good, positive example he's setting for other people.
Totally. I mean, there's a lot of discussion right now about like, why aren't they forcibly keeping them in? Well, we can't, right?
You can't imprison them.
You cannot put them in jail. That's forced detention. This is, public health really requires self-determination and cooperation and the ability to do it yourself. So, and mind you, humans are going to human, and sometimes you're going to see what happened. And I think it was it in Italy? I think a guy was at a bar and had to be like forcibly removed. He was not symptomatic, but there are humans who are going to do dumb human things too.
Of course. And what I liked about this Atlantic Josh he goes by was he was like, he's such a sweet man. He just seems so nice. And he was like, they brought me a Starbucks today. I haven't had iced coffee in 6 weeks. And he was just like sipping his little drink. And it was like, what a sweet man.
Very
sweet
man.
Good. And he's doing like what he's eating. It's really fun to watch. So it's changed my experience with this from one of like fear and anxiety to one of like, kind of vibes. It's good. But there is a scary thing out there. And that thing is the raccoon penis, whale penis, bear killing weirdo that is RFK Jr. and all his swimming in sewage nonsense. And now, on account of his leadership, I guess we would call it, there is a bit of a measles issue out there. And you made this beautiful flow chart of what you should do about measles. So talk us through it.
Yeah. So we are probably weeks away from losing our measles elimination status, which is very embarrassing. And so because of that, I'm, a colleague of mine, Dr. Lauren Hughes, who's amazing, a pediatrician in Kansas City, we created this chart to help parents who are wondering, okay, well, if we are in the middle of unprecedented transmission, what does this mean for my under-vaccinated, not yet vaccinated, or even fully vaccinated child? And I actually walked through this chart myself because my youngest, who is 4, we got her second dose a year early at 3 last year because we had some international travel planned. And I wanted to kind of tell folks, like, this is how I use this chart. And I answered these questions. I said, I asked, like, do you live or are you traveling to an area with a known outbreak, or are you traveling internationally? We were traveling internationally. And because I said yes, I went down. Is my child less than 12 months? She was not. But she did have her first MMR vaccine. The second dose is typically given between ages 4 and 5, basically to get kids fully vaccinated by kindergarten. But because she was 3 and we were about to go on a very big international trip, I thought, I'm not gonna risk this. And because all you require really is 28 days between dose 1 and dose 2. The next question was, has it been more than 28 days? It had been a few years since she got her first dose at 12 months. And so I scheduled that second dose. And so it's a very usable, easy chart. Most pediatricians will look at this and say, yep, this is a good risk benefit, analysis of what you should do. And it's still true today. We made this last year and it's still true because unfortunately there are ongoing measles outbreaks in the US. There are measles outbreaks happening overseas as well. And it's just not worth risking your kid if we know that we have a vaccine that is 97% effective at preventing infection.
Well, here we are with that word. Now you've summoned them, Jessica. The anti-vax clan. This has got to also be a grift. What would the benefit be in being I'll take any vaccine. I don't care. If you were like, there's a hantavirus vaccine, even though I'm very low risk because I don't go outside, I'd be like, I'll take it. Why not? When I had to get like all my re-vaccines, I did this thing with the military a couple of years ago and I had to get like fucking a panel of them. And I was like, great. Can we just do them all at once? I don't care. I would have got the COVID vaccine twice if I could have. I love a vaccine. I'm very happy with it. But there's a lot of people who have now gone this anti-vaccine route. It feels a little grifty because oftentimes they're like, don't take a vaccine, take this supplement. What's the grift with the anti-vaxxers?
It's how long do you have? Truly,
all day, babe, all day. I love talking about this.
Same. I mean, honestly, it's my whole job. But it's fascinating because the spectrum of vaccine refusal is not small. It's quite wide. It's quite diverse. And I would say that many, many people probably exist in this hesitant space that's kind of in the more movable middle. The fringe on the extreme is always going to exist. You're always going to have people who will fight with you that the earth is flat, and you will fight with you that all vaccines are bad and cause no benefits to children or adults. There's always going to be that. Not a lot of utility in debating with those folks. However, I have seen many of people on that fringe extreme end change their mind, which has been really fascinating. But there's a lot of fear that influences these sentiments. And I have a lot of empathy for that, because you have a child, I have 3 kids, you have this child comes out of you like this perfect, everything about it is precious. And like, you're like, well, I don't want to put anything in them unless it's like the best thing. Right. And then you realize, wow, the whole world is trying to kill us all the time. There are pathogens all around us. We don't live in sterile environments. There are microbes all around us. These babies don't know how to clot their blood without vitamin K. They could hemorrhage even in the hospital. And so these are interventions that we've learned over time that literally, V, are the reason why we're not dying at the age 30 anymore. I mean, there's people talk about longevity and wellness. I'm like, you want to talk about longevity? The 2 things that have kept our life expectancy continuing to go up are vaccines and clean water. That's why we're not dying at age 25, 30. That's why people don't have to have 11 kids so that 1 to 3 of them might survive. Yeah. You know,
well, also because we have birth control now, which is fantastic. At least for a little while. I don't know. We got to check. It's 11/11. Make a wish. We got to check in with SCOTUS blog and see how it went today. But you know, somebody just got a shingles vaccine. I'm a little bit afraid I'll get shingles because I had chickenpox.
Listen,
chickenpox vaccine. I didn't even know.
Chickenpox vaccine. Our kids will never know the hell of chickenpox and an oatmeal bath because they got the varicella vaccine. Their risk of shingles is so much lower than yours and mine because I went to a chickenpox party in the 80s.
Same. And I knew I was going. And it's like, no, like, why would you tell me this ahead of time? Why would you tell your children, we're going to go get you chickenpox and you're going to break out in all these little hives? It's going to be terrible. I was like, what? Why would we do that?
Look, it's awful. And honestly, I'm kind of like, I'm going to be 43 soon. I'm like, when can I be 50 so that I could get the shingles vaccine? Because not only does it prevent shingles, shingles is awful. There's early data to show that it could have all these amazing secondary benefits, like reducing the risk of Alzheimer's or dementia. I'm like, sign me up.
Yes, I'll take it. You know what I was mad about? Because I think we're about the same age, probably. I could not get the HPV vaccine. I was too old for when the HPV vaccine came out.
Wait,
I mean,
when
I didn't
did
need
they
it because I'm a lesbian, but I was like, so they were like,
are
you at any risk? I was like, no. They're like, okay. But for whatever reason, when it first came out, you had to be like under 21 or something. And I was older than that when it first came out.
They've changed the age eligibility. You can now get it up until your late 40s.
Oh,
so you are not ineligible. And I will say, regardless of your sexual orientation or sexual past, I would say everybody requires HPV vaccination because a lot of people don't recognize that like hands and mouths are major vectors of this virus. It's not just, heterosexual intercourse. Many ways, if you think about it, oral pharyngeal cancer, which is like head, neck, and throat cancer, one of the leading causes of cancer from HPV virus infection. So, yeah.
All right, I'm going to get it.
Go get it.
My wife, we're going. You know, why not? I love
and that's
that.
The thing
like
too.
I said, I love a vaccine.
I know. And your doctor may think you're a little cuckoo, but honestly, some people could have dormant HPV and it activate much later in life. So
see, this is my ignorance, which is going to be a problem for a lot of people who are ignorant about HIV, AIDS, and tuberculosis, because now we've killed all the funding to teach people about those things, thanks to RFK Jr. as well.
It's awful.
What kind of impact do you think we're going to see? Because HIV, when I grew up in the 90s, right, my mom worked at a doctor's office that dealt with a lot of that in New Haven at Yale. And it was like, that's where they were dealing with it. And she knew so much more about it than anybody else around us. And then I feel like from till now, there's been so much work done on it. And it's really not a death sentence the way that it was. And it really doesn't have the stigma that it did. And we've been able to control it and people know what they're doing with it now. And now RFK Jr. is like, nah, take away all the funding, take away all the prep, take away everything, not just here in the United States, but abroad as well.
Yeah.
What do you think this is going to do to, the control that we once had on measles, the control we once had on HIV?
This is the problem that I think a lot of folks are not seeing, is that some of the consequences to this like slash and burn Doge effect of this administration may not show up today in the data. They may not show up next year in the data, but it's going to have a unbelievable collateral damage that will be residual for many, many years. Mm-hmm. So let's think about hepatitis B, right? Hepatitis B vaccines we give at birth because we know that if a baby gets it, there's a 90% chance they'll get chronic infection and have possibly cirrhosis or cancer. It's a cancer vaccine. Mm. And yet these kids are probably going to grow into their teens, 20s, 30s. And some of them are going to have an untreatable disease that will outlive RFK Jr., that will outlive Trump. And we're going to see it in the data much, much later. The same thing for HIV/AIDS. HIV is a chronic condition. And if you don't have the medication to keep you from not turning over, where you're not detectable, then you can die prematurely, like people were dying prematurely in the 80s. It is absolutely a preventable catastrophe that you would not give people the tools that we have miraculously, I mean, not miraculously, but just through incredible innovation created to keep people in a healthy, stable condition and not turn it into something that will, many people who have HIV and don't have the treatment will get so severely sick that the smallest pathogens will cause them to be severely ill because it's an immunosuppressant condition. So they could die from pneumonia, they could die from tuberculosis. It's just wildly cruel to me that we would remove something that, again, isn't this like a chronic disease type of approach? Like, I don't get it. Hepatitis B is a chronic disease. HIV is arguably a chronic disease if you're infected with it and you can be, you know, in condition affecting your immune system. And yet there's this very unfortunate, it feels like a revenge tour is how I describe it, because they don't want to talk about infectious diseases. They don't want to deal with infectious diseases, that they cannot even see that infectious diseases are inextricably linked with chronic diseases. Many chronic diseases are caused by viruses and bacteria. And they just want to separate them. I mean, RFK said, infectious disease had enough funding. Let's just stop that for now. Let's focus on chronic diseases. It's just like shooting your foot and expecting to walk. Yeah. Because you have another one, you know?
I don't know where he gets these ideas from, honestly. Maybe it's the brainworm whispering to him, but it's so frustrating to me, especially with the HIV stuff, to see us come so far and now be like, nah, we're going to let everybody get it again. Like we didn't recently learn how horrific that death is and how easily it spreads, and that it doesn't just affect gay people and all this other bullshit.
Right.
How worried are you about tuberculosis coming back? Because, okay, my gramps had tuberculosis, right? He got it from, he was like a veterinarian type person for a while. And then he got TB from the cows. And then he did not do that anymore. And he died very young when my mom was only 8. And then it was like, you go to the tuberculosis hospital, right? And they're doing all this stuff. And now all those tuberculosis hospitals are shut down. We don't even have the infrastructure to help people if this were to come back. Is it coming back?
It is not gone, right? And I'm haunted by the words of John Green in his book, Everything is Tuberculosis, that like, we know how to live in a world without TB. We just choose not to do it. We have not innovated enough on TB, something that has killed more people than probably any other disease in the world, because we've known about it through centuries of documentation. And yet here we are still allowing people to die this miserable death. Awful. And we know, I mean, all these, lies about cutting USAID was not going to have any consequences. It absolutely already has in testing, in treatment, because we have treatment that actually works, in preventing drug-resistant tuberculosis, which is a hell of a condition, because then you're having to be basically, in some cases, detained in these wards to comply. Right. And these drugs are gnarly, V. They are really an assault on your body. They make you feel like crap. And so adherence to these drugs, especially when you're in the resistant type of infection, is so miserable. So why aren't we doing more to prevent it? Why haven't we innovated enough and invested in a vaccine that can fully prevent this? I mean, it's been over 100 years since we've had an innovation on TB vaccines. And I do think it's probably going to come back.
It's so unfortunate, but
there was a TB outbreak here actually in SF.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. At a high school.
At a high school.
Oh
boy.
Yeah.
Man, that sucks.
Thankfully, nobody, they were mostly latent cases, and latent cases can be managed through treatment. But it's a long, several week process of being on intense antibiotics to prevent it from converting into an active infection.
Awful for such a young person too, to have to deal with all of that crap for no reason,
Yeah.
But there is a miracle drug out there. I'm not sure if you've heard about it yet.
Ivermectin?
Yeah, here it is, baby. It's got a horse right on the box. How do you see a horse on the box and you go, yeah, I'm going to take that. That's for me. I'm going to do that one. But all the grifters from COVID who stockpiled ivermectin are trying to bring it back out now, saying, oh, you do your daily ivermectin lick and you're good to go. And this is what it looks like. It comes in this tube. They put it on the back of their hand and they lick it off. There is a horse on the box, people.
But you can get apple flavored, V.
I'm going to die. I can't.
It's delicious.
So now all these people who stockpiled all that ivermectin are hauling it out and they're like, yeah, it'll cure tuberculosis and measles and AIDS and every other thing.
And cancer.
And it's a preventative. Now it's a vitamin. Now we'll do vitamins. We don't give vitamin K to the babies so that they don't brain bleed, but we take ivermectin. Like, what part of you, how deep are you in the cult that you lick horse paste with your morning coffee?
So much of this is not about logic. So much of
Right.
this is not about reason or even evidence, because there's a doctor, an MD, whose license was reinstated by the Attorney General in Texas after multiple disciplinary actions for doing this very same thing during COVID, shilling ivermectin. She's back on the internet saying, oh, but it can actually prevent the way that hantavirus replicates in the body. No, if she remembered anything about microbiology, it's an RNA virus. RNA viruses do not replicate in the nucleus. They replicate in the cytoplasm. You don't have to know that. I do, because I'm a dork and I have to remember these things. But even if I tell people it is physically impossible to do the thing that the person selling you the drug is claiming it to do, it has become such an identity of contrarianism, an identity of, well, the people that I believe to be trustworthy are doing this, so I'm going to follow them, an anti-establishment bias. I mean, there's a lot of heuristics and behavioral psychology to learn about the why. It has nothing to do with if the science says so. No matter how many times I've said, the data that you keep citing is based on a petri dish, that if you gave that dose to a human, you'd give them a toxic dose. I mean, they love to talk about toxins. And I'm trying to tell you, like, it would be toxic to take it at the right dose to have that meaningful effect. It doesn't matter. You're not dealing with reason. You're dealing with a deep, deep white knuckle grip on identity politics. And that's a very different type of information battle that you have to deal with. I do think some people are helped by the kind of like, well, let me tell you why scientifically this is implausible. Then the rest kind of have to like really spend some time to detangle that very kind of at all costs belief in the people or the institutions that they are so beholden to.
It's just nuts. And it's not helped by the fact that the people who are supposed to be the adults in the room and the doctors are, longtime grifters and criminals.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember this from Dr. Oz, the green coffee bean, a miracle fat burner. And the FTC actually had a case against him for deceiving customers through fake news sites and bogus weight loss claims. Like the FTC of the United States of America, the same country that he is now serving in some sort of like cabinet position for, sued him for lying to people and deceptively failing to disclose that he was like getting paid to hawk this and it wasn't just his like opinion.
Yeah.
And he did this 5 different times. There was the saffron scam. There was what was the other one? There was the green bean, the raspberry ketones, the #1 fat miracle burner. Then we had the Garnachia cambogia extract that was the newest fat burner, the African mango diet pill, and saffron extract. This man is just impossibly grifty. He's been called out a million times for it, and yet he stands up there next to Donald Trump, who is, stroking out every freaking minute and falling asleep. And he's like, no, everything's going great. Like, where in your mind do you go from being a kind of genius cardiologist to this level of like delusional grifter?
Money. I mean, that is the most simple answer. If you want to talk about conflicts of interest, take a look at the grift and the lucrative opportunities that there is in anti-science wellness. I mean, I am not here defending pharma at all. No, but if you compare the industry size of big pharma compared to big wellness, you're talking about like David and Goliath scale difference, trillions with a T of an unregulated, unmonitored.
This is the supplements
space.
People.
The supplement people. But everything that he was shilling would fall into that space. It doesn't have FDA coverage or regulation or monitoring. It's just, you can say whatever you want. And because you can say whatever you want, you can just sell it for $10.99 a month or whatever the price is. You do a little BOGO deal, you do a little follow the link in my bio and use this discount code. I mean, in 100 out of 100 cases, you're going to see somebody who's veering from consensus. It's going to lead you to an opportunity to spend money.
Right. And this is where we get into like the manosphere, looks maxing, trad wifing. Yep. I saw this one this morning, balls maxing.
Ew.
Men are inflating their testicles to the size of grapefruits to balls max with peptides and saline. I truly do not know. Now, I first heard about this during the Olympics when the skiers were doing it, so they had more space in their wingspan. Yeah, their uniforms were wider in the crotch. But apparently, men have gone from smashing their faces to create bruising and swelling to give themselves a better jawline to ball maxing. And I just think perhaps we've reached the end of society, Doc.
Truly.
I just...
This is when we need to like Control Alt Delete. Just
what are the dangers of ball maxing? Like you could probably rupture your scrotum, I would imagine.
I am not a urologist, but I would imagine that would not be good for your testicles. I also think it would hurt.
I would think so.
Like,
you know?
How would you walk and sit comfortably or exercise? Like, I just can't imagine that would be a condition that you'd want in such a delicate area.
And like, are they showing each other? Is it like, how are you proving it? Are you wearing like, are you like free balling out there at the gym in your gray sweatpants and balls maxing? This is very homoerotic. It's very homoerotic.
Like the whole thing, the like sunning your taint and the whole thing. Like it's just,
I know. I know what it is, sun holing or something. There's all these crazy things. I don't have the time in my day. I wish that I did to think up these things.
To do these things.
Like, and then convince other people to do them. What do you think is going to be the next big grift? Like, are you seeing anything trending on the horizon? Because we had the raw milk and then they dialed back from that. And now the trad wives are very into like protein powder. It seems that Ballerina Farm Girls got her own protein powder instead of the raw milk. Now they're on the colostrum, that being the whole thing.
Yeah.
What do you think is the next big grift that folks should watch out for?
It's anything that is going to let people think is going to like reduce aging or increase longevity, right? So it could be things that already exist. It could be things that they're just going to like tweak a little bit. I mean, the peptides craze is a perfect example of that. They're, you know,
I got it in caps in the chat here. Peptides.
Yes, exactly.
What is a peptide?
A peptide.
It's like an injectable.
Well, it can be, but like a peptide is, our body makes peptides. A GLP-1 is a peptide. A peptide is like a very essential part of like how our body produces lots of things like muscles and energy. And the way in which people will do anything except for eat a balanced diet and exercise and sleep. Like one of the most viral pieces of content I ever created was with a couple other content creators. And we were like, what's your favorite longevity hack? And we're like, sleeping, drinking water, eating, high fiber,
stretching,
not drinking a lot of alcohol, exercising, lowering your stress, getting off social media so that you're not using it as a primary source for health information. It's just, again, there's so much money to be made.
I know you can't spike your cortisol now.
No, everything is poor cortisol. Cortisol is so essential. And like the anti-cortisol, like I get it. Sometimes cortisol can be really problematic for some people at high doses, but like, are we just going to cancel cortisol? We can't.
They're like, you're spiking my cortisol, bro. Well, you're injecting peptides into your balls. I think the cortisol is the least of your problems.
It's unbelievable. I had a friend actually just like cold text me like, what do you think of peptides? I'm like, do you believe in vaccines? Because that's my first question. Because I sometimes I feel like it's that same kind of like, I'll inject this thing that is somebody is selling me on Instagram, but don't give me something that has been rigorously tested for years or has saved 154 million lives in the last 50 years. No, I can't deal with that.
First of all, is that going to make me skinny, Jess? Because that's if you said that the vaccine will make you skinny, you'd see a lot of people change their mind on it.
Honestly, it's one of the funniest things I ever saw this week was an OBGYN being like, what if we just, wellnessified all of these things? We said like, instead of, hepatitis B being a vaccine, what if it was like this longevity peptide that was going to, reduce any, liver imbalance. Like you just kind of did a word salad around all the actual things and just put it in beige and like a sans serif font. People would run to it.
Yes. No, I think you're onto something. If you can't beat them, join them and maybe try to flood the market with some good advice. I feel like it must be so hard to be a kid these days. It's just so hard to be a person who's not comfortable in your own skin in general. And I was talking to my wife this morning about trends in like influencer stuff that goes on. Cause I almost got veneers. And
oh, wow.
Because my teeth are crooked on the bottom. And so I almost got veneers. And then I learned what veneers do, like how you have to file your teeth and stuff. And I was just so skivatzed out. I couldn't handle it. So I got braces. And it sucked. And they come off in July. But getting the braces, I'm really glad because now everybody gets made fun of for having veneers. And I'm like, okay, there was a way to fix it that wasn't so Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And then it was like everybody got filler and Botox. I've never done either one of them. I just didn't. And now people are dissolving their filler. And then people are now doing that upper bleph.
The bleph,
they're getting their eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I also have hooded eyelids, but I don't want to do it because now I'm afraid that it'll be influencer face. So I like get interested in these trending medical influencer things, but I never do them. And then if I wait long enough, and you don't have to wait that long, it goes out of fashion. So
you're gonna love this. I posted a video recently about hantavirus, and then some person on the Facebook, cross-posted, so on the Facebook page of my page, they put, "How can we tell if you're AI or not?" And somebody was like, "Do you think AI is gonna give someone under eye bags?" No offense, no offense, Jess, but all real women have it. I was like, honestly, I'm not mad that I am aging. I love aging, but I'm
it's
also
a privilege.
like, it's a privilege, it's a gift, but also like, drag me, like,
girl. I know. Hello. How do we know if you're AI? Good question.
I've got bags.
Natural facial features. This is gonna be the new thing because we don't look like Uncanny Valley.
Exactly.
Oh boy. Well, it's been so great chatting with you. Tell folks where they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram at Jessica Malati Rivera. You can also find me on Substack at Making Science Make Sense.
Perfect. And don't forget to check in on our favorite little guy doing the most in quarantine on his Peloton bike. His name is Jake. I called him Josh. I'm so sorry, Jake. Jake's out here with his little squishmallows and he's so happy with his little coffee. What a sweet man, you know? And I know some people are protesting Starbucks. The man is in quarantine. He can only get what he can get. Let's let him have his little treat. It's okay. Just this one.
He can have a treat.
He can have a treat. All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you again soon.
For sure. Bye.
Oh, what a fun show we had today. No balls maxing, please. If you're going to get plastic surgery, really think about it. I think 2 years is a good time to think about plastic surgery. If you still want it after that amount of time, you probably really do want it, and the trend hasn't changed. Check out the reporting from The Intercept and from Courier Newsroom. Always happy to support other independent newsrooms. And we will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. with Dava. We'll be talking about all the things that happened on the Plath show, those horrible people, what's going on with the custody case of Hunter and Bella from Unexpected. And also we are going to talk about that Netflix limited series, Should I Marry a Murderer? If you haven't watched it, maybe try and watch it tonight or tomorrow morning and tune in. We'll be talking all about that kind of stuff, the reality TV of it all. Great show. Thanks to everybody who showed up today. We will see you tomorrow. Bye.